joined by dear friends and new friends alike. We have Eva Kelly. If you can introduce yourselves, we'll do introductions going this way. Then we'll start putting your feet to the fire and talking regulation, talking governments. Please have a little introduction.
It's Eva Kaili. I am a member of the European Parliament. Have been working a lot on blockchain technology and legislation. And now I'm working on the resolution for blockchain. This means we're actually giving directions to the Commission to come up with a proper way of regulating, not the technology, but the applications. This is my main thing. It's economics and also new technologies, basically. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Vadim Kalukhov. I have worked in Central Bank of Russia several years, responsible for promoting of financial technologies. Oh yes, one more person. Yes, now I joined to Crossil is a company who will represent e-wallet, payment system and so on based on cryptocurrency as soon as I would like to implement everything that I learned before.
Hello, yeah, I'm Tony Antanas, known as Tony G as well from poker, but also in the European Parliament at the moment, and I'm working in the subcommittees of URI and IMCO, so I'm very close to, especially and excited about blockchain and quite a big follower of crypto, even recommended for all our members to buy some a few years back.
Hi, my name's Marcus Killick. I'm the last one to sit down, but they got me a chair. I am the chairman of the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. I also sit on the board of Gibraltar International Bank, and for 11 years prior to that, I was a regulator. So my main involvement in respect of this environment is the work that we're currently doing at the exchange and also on the legal sphere in helping a number of ICOs actually get properly launched.
Good morning, my name is Albert Isler. I'm the Minister for Commerce in the Government of Gibraltar. I've been tasked with driving forward our initiative on the DLT framework. We issued a consultation paper in May of this year, and it will be coming into legislation in January of 2018, which is an innovative and interesting approach to the regulatory framework for the DLT technology. Thank you.
Cool, so let's jump right into this. I think there's a lot of people here. There's two conversations we could have. We could have the investment side of things in blockchain technology, and we could have the ICO discussion. I think on a lot of people's minds here is the ICO discussion. And what we see a lot in ICOs that are launching, they search for the ideal jurisdiction that's not going to be too heavy-handed with regulation, that's going to be open to innovation in a certain way. I'm wondering, is there going to be a harmonized treatment of this globally at some point? What are your thoughts, maybe based on the location that you're working in Gibraltar, in the European Union, in your experience in Russia? Could we go through the panel lists and talk about, is there a better environment jurisdiction? Is there a worse? Or will there be harmony?
Well, I think from our perspective, there will be harmony, but it'll take a lot longer. It'll take time, not just from the European Union, from outside the European Union. And so our perspective has been quite simple. It's looking at the transfer of value as a business. And so we are very much focusing on those that want regulatory certainty, which of course many do, primarily the quality operators, but with consumer protection as the focus. Whether the regulation will increase or decrease as time goes by, I think it's a question of the technology finding its space within the regulatory framework and the regulatory ambit.
Well, we're trying to get there, so this is why we've started something in the European Union, because it will be difficult if everything is set up in its member state, then to go and try to coordinate it or harmonize it. So we're trying to be in advance ahead and try to at least define some of the wording around blockchain technology, because we have a very important problem. If you ask if you would be here, all members of the parliament, and I would ask you how many of you have e-wallets or like a cryptocurrency. It's just me and Tony, I think. That's all. I don't think there are many. So there is a problem also for a definition. So if you say blockchain or DLT, there are some differences that you have to study a lot to understand that. So unless we are able to identify these different definitions, and also about the ICOs, how we're going to treat it, if we can have some kind of registry. So you cannot regulate the innovation, the technology, but you can make sure there is transparency, there is a registry for those. And this, I think, would be a first step for the whole European Union to be a stable environment for this technology to flourish. And just let me say, I do believe that in Europe we have a very supportive approach to this technology.
Okay, if I can say several words about Russia, what to say? If we will speak about blockchain, it's widely supported. Widely supported in Moscow, usually each week 2 or 3 events where teams somehow to discuss or present their solutions. Some of them, of course, based on cryptocurrency, some is pure blockchain and so on. As for cryptocurrency regulation in Russia, no, frankly speaking, regulation is not in place yet. It's just under discussion. Mainly I can say that as soon as the government support blockchain, from other side government, I cannot say that support cryptocurrency. As soon as central bank has issued 3 or 5 letters where it was written that you should be cautious, it's risky, QIC risks, and so on and so on and so on. That's why mainly I believe we should expect some agreement, most probably on the level of the FATF, on the level of G20 or some, how to say, bank summits where it will be somehow some common approach will be agreed between, because as for the moment I cannot say that this or that jurisdiction has issued the full set of regulation. In one jurisdiction you see, okay, that ICO somehow described, and other cryptocurrency somehow described. Another, you can sell, in some you can see something regarding QIC, but globally, as soon as we see that globally cryptocurrency is natural answer for strong regulation, if I can say like this. Because as we can see in banks area, for example, quite strong regulation and almost everything is regulated. And cryptocurrency for the moment, it's the, as I told, the natural answer that the community against of this has produced cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency products, if I can say like this. And for the moment, these two worlds, fully regulated world, and this, for the moment, unregulated world, try to work together.
Okay, so from my perspective, sure, me and Eva, we're pro. There's other members that are pro crypto, pro blockchain, pro evolution and development, and a lot of smart people see this is an opportunity for Europe to be very liberal, very open, and take a risk, because it is taking a risk. As everyone knows, a lot of those initial coin offerings represent a tremendous amount of risks for the investors, because most likely 90% will not provide anything, and at the end there will be some mess to clean up. So I think anyone that's intelligent understands those risks. But for the community anyway, for those 10% who are fair, who are honest, and who are providing the best possible means of return in the future, I think it's an opportunity. And I think the opportunity will only last until there's regulation. Once regulation does come in, it's going to be pretty much the same as IPO. Because the beauty of it now, that people can invest without knowing who they are, right? That they're buying the coins. And this is the fact. This is what makes things very easy, and it can get funded very fast for large amounts of money. And if those people use that money properly, they can change the world, right? This is what's happening, and this is what I'm hoping will happen. But once there's regulation, it's going to be the same. You know, what happens is very expensive bankers and very expensive lawyers run the show, and then things change. So there's a big community I think in politics who understand this, and who will fight for as long as possible for no regulation, even taking into account all the risks that do stem from it, because there are a tremendous amount of risks. And that's why the community itself, all the people with authority should self-regulate as soon as possible, and should expose those scammers who are out there, because there's too many initial coin offerings at the moment of low quality. And this is where everyone has to unite and regulate as much as possible and get success stories out there. And if that happens, if there's great success stories, great development in terms of changing the world, I think then it's a revolution. But if it goes the other way, it's going to be pretty ugly.
I think harmonization in theory is a lovely idea. Do I think it's going to happen anytime soon? Absolutely not. The US can't even agree on a statewide basis, let alone on a national basis. As you've heard, there are people in the EU, EU MEPs who are in favor. There are those who are dead set against. What we have with blockchain, what we have with cryptocurrencies are game changers, and there are those with vested interests, and they will fight. They will fight under the illusion of investor protection, where they mean self-protection. They will make outrageous claims about Bitcoin and other things. Yes, absolutely. Within this environment, we are all in a darkened room, stumbling around, trying to find the billion-dollar ICO. There will be those, but there'll be an awful lot of rubbish in there as well. Within blockchain, there is bullshit. The best way of dealing with it is to be self-aware. The best way of dealing with regulation within this environment is self-regulation supported by effective government and regulatory assistance. We are at our best policing ourselves. The good ICOs do not want to be anywhere near the bad ICOs. One of the advantages of dealing with this on a national rather than an international basis is that it is far more easy to move at the pace of the industry. The industry will not stand still waiting for an EU directive. It will move forward and forward. The directives will never catch up. However, on a national basis, and I applaud the work that the government and the regulator has done in Gibraltar in cooperation with the industry, working with the banks to ensure that there is banking relationships possible for the ICOs, to conduct vetting, to have sensible regulation on a national basis, hopefully to act as a model for the international environment. That is the way forward. But first, it is self-policing, followed by sensible and rational regulatory support.
I feel like there might be some comments about that.
Well, I mean, look, I think as a politician, trying to put in place a framework that is innovative and which allows the private sector to drive its own business, we depend to a great extent on self-policing and self-regulation. But we believe that there needs to be a framework within which you can operate with certainty. If you think about it, in the coming months and years, as regulation begins to kick in across different countries, is what you've done legal? You need to have that certainty, and I believe with the inherent risks, which I think all the speakers have referred to, there is around especially ICOs and ITOs, there is a need for a framework, there is a need for best practice, there is a need to understand what steps you should take in a simple way to protect the consumers that are investing in you. And so the idea of a innovative framework around which you can have that certainty, have the best practice, and have those rules which will enable you to do a lot of the work yourself by self-regulation is the right step today. But this is a nascent business. This is a nascent technology. This has got an awful long way to go. So the way that we are doing it is saying there's got to be a lot of discretionary power around the regulatory regime simply because it is moving so quickly. You can't box this up and think job done. This is moving and alive, and every day that goes by is going to continue to evolve, it's going to continue to change, and until you have a regulator that understands that, there's going to be no progress. But I certainly believe that regulation is the way forward to protect consumers from the risks which they may not understand themselves at this stage.
Well, if I may say, there are also some developers and people that work on blockchain technology that even themselves, they don't know the possibilities of this technology. So it's like completely impossible to regulate this thing. What we can do is to say what it is not for the time being, if it is a security or if it is not a security, an ICO, if it is a currency or if it is like treated as a currency, but we don't know yet. So there are a lot of things that we have to define. One thing we can do and we should do is to make sure that people understand what they're doing. So this is extremely important because even you, if you lose your wallet or your device and you cannot retrieve your private key, then you would have thought that maybe it would be good to have some kind of protection and regulation. And when I asked to my friends here, where do the money go when you lose your mobile phone or your private keys? So nobody knows, right? It's gone. No, you cannot retrieve it. So I think we have to work around these, the old traditional definitions and to create new ones, because sometimes ICOs, you cannot define it with the traditional wording. So we have to find new ones. I think this will take, so we're starting a European observatory now on blockchain technology. It will be launched, I think, 2018, very early, and it will last for a couple of years. So this means that the next year or 2 years, we're not going to have something like that would ever stop or block anything. The opposite, as I said, I think we're very supportive to this technology. One thing we have to understand is that when you apply to countries where the financial system is not very well established, then you have a lot of possibilities to do something new. But when you try to do it in Europe, where there is resistance from the traditional system, it's more difficult to take a part of the market. So I've been talking to some bankers, and they don't like it. They didn't like fintech. I worked a lot with fintech, and Tony did. So it was very difficult to get the data and give it to fintech companies. So when we told them, you know, there are the hidden costs that are like more than 100 billion of our transactions out there, and we want this to be reduced for our citizens, then this is very difficult for somebody to resist. So we managed to get the fintech report going, and this means we're going to do the same for blockchain technologies. And if I may say something, so Tony is very known as a poker player, besides my colleague in the European Parliament. So I saw, if you like Google him, there is on YouTube some amazing videos. So there is this video which reminds me a lot of the ICOs. So there are like a few players left, it's $500,000 at stake, and the guy next to him, they have this final round, and Tony said, so I'm not going to look at my cards, so are you in or out? So this guy is like completely confused, and he said like, really, you're not going to look at your cards? And I said like, no, I'm not. And he said, So he's like thinking about like a couple of seconds, and then he said, I'm all in. So he puts everything in, like the ICOs, for example. And then Tony turns his card, he wins, he starts laughing, and he said like, what happened? And he said like, come on, it's not kindergarten, it's poker, of course I saw my cards.
Yeah, that hand was against Phil Hellmuth, you know. And I've had some memorable hands against Russians as well, and I've been very fortunate enough to win some money there. So everyone can follow me on Twitter to Tony Guaga. It's quite easy.
No, he was like, but you lied. And he said, yes, it's poker.
Let's talk about that now. Maybe this is a good segue into iGaming and the corollaries between iGaming and ICOs. It seems like we're in an intersection in the timeline of blockchain technology where there's a lot of money redistributed to new projects. There's a huge open sea. People are wanting to get in on it. And from the software and developer and gaming companies, they're trying to create the products that can capture this redistribution of wealth and investments. And anybody that wants to play poker needs a place to play it. And so what we saw there were a few jurisdictions which were better than others. People needed to set up quickly. And so they set up in Malta, Gibraltar, Macau, wherever they can to capture all that value. Are we going to look back in 5 years and say, it was iGaming 2.0, we didn't have a place to set up, so we set up wherever?
Yeah, I would say something about jurisdictions. You know, I've had a lot of experience in gaming as well, being a founder of PokerNews.com and having experience in Isle of Man, and I know Isle of Man is also pushing for initial coin offerings. Gibraltar. Obviously, those jurisdictions are very different than being in Eurozone or being in Japan or being in Australia, which is a lot more fundamentally sound and much larger, although Gibraltar offers great expertise and so on, but it's still not in Eurozone. It's still not in as a major country. The countries which are very flexible. So you should keep that in mind, because I don't know if the jurisdiction will help you when you're raising money, because it's basically decentralized anyway, right? And so this jurisdiction question will be very difficult to say that you're raising just from Isle of Man or just from Gibraltar, it's fine. But if you're raising from Americans or if you're raising from other countries, there's a lot of legal issues there. So I'm still excited while it's not regulated. And as soon as it will be regulated and governments start competing, it'll change fundamentally because nothing will stop you from doing an IPO in Gibraltar now, right, or IPO anywhere in the world. I know that European Central Bank is quite cautious, but some of the banks are quite liberal, especially the Lithuanian Reserve Bank, who've been licensing people with e-money license and giving an opportunity to those exchanges, because the key is going to be liquidity, right? It's so difficult to get a bank account. I know some people have raised money and then they can't get a bank account open. They can't get any fiat. So there's a lot of issues, and I think it's going to be difficult, and the environment will not be any easier to be able to cash out, to be able to move money, and to be able to justify it. So we have to keep all of that in mind.
Is the future going to be where IPs are blocked based on jurisdictions like iGaming?
Yeah, but you just use NordVPN and you just use a virtual. So, I mean, we just need smart people to understand the world, and then it's easy to regulate. And I think it's all going to be about education. It's all about education and the community self-regulating. All the people who are doing initial coin offering should get great advisors so that they're trusted, and allow those advisors to look into the business so that they can provide good advice to the community. Because if you're just scamming and just are greedy for money very quickly, it's going to hurt things. So I think the best regulator will be the community and people with authority, and lots of people with authority. That's what can change the world, and nothing can stop it. Governments will not help you here that much.
I think it's interesting, the correlation between, as you mentioned, iGaming and now this. We started regulating gaming companies 22 years ago before the internet existed. And we didn't have a regulatory platform, we didn't have legislation, so we regulated the firms by contract. And what we found was that the firms that wanted to come to Gibraltar were the ones that were looking for regulation, because they were quality operators that wanted to be in that space. We had a very simple philosophy, and you talk about some of these firms. We have 75% of the online bets placed in the United Kingdom are written in Gibraltar. So the business is huge. And we have today some 30 licensed operators. In the 22 years since we started, not one of them has failed. And that's because you attract the firms that want to be regulated properly with a sensible and pragmatic approach to the business, which is what we pride ourselves in. And so I see the similarities between that 22 years ago and today actually very similar. We're not scared to innovate. We're happy to do things, but let's do things properly. Let's stop the scammers. Let's stop the stuff that's going on that shouldn't be going on, which will harm everyone else in this room if they carry on and succeed, because at the end of the day, it's the business that will get the damage through one or two who will spoil it for everyone else. So I think an element of regulation is critical, and I think from our experience with gaming, it worked. Absolutely, it worked.
What I will add, usually when we discuss everything related to regulation, it's a set of words. We heard them today. It's security, lack of security, it's QIC, lack of QIC. It's a lot of regarding jurisdictions, because usually financial world quite closed. I mean, each jurisdiction protect borders. And crypto world is opposite. It's unclear jurisdiction in majority cases. In majority cases, it's quite difficult to say who is responsible for this or that operation, because it's cross-border in majority cases. Yes, of course, regulation will appear. Yes, it will take 1, 2, 3 years. It will appear step by step, because what is good that for the moment all regulators, if I can say like this, don't want to forbid. They try to find the way how to protect, but don't pronounce the word it's forbidden, it's closed, it will not take place. Usually it's, okay, we maybe even stop this or that operation before we'll implement the regulation. Yes. And next step, it's usually regulators push the market, telling them that lack of infrastructure will slow down the process of issuing of regulation. Because usually when we even speak to each other, we speak about several projects, this project, that project, interoperability, and so on, but globally, if we'll see the, how to say, classical, if I can say like this, financial market, it's a lot of different layers of infrastructures. Very regulated, very clear. You usually understand in each jurisdiction what rules, what cross-border operation. A lot of legal firms will give you advice what and where you can do. If we speak about crypto world, if I can say this, even about blockchain, if we will forget about cryptocurrency for a second, not so many for the moment is in place. Infrastructure is not fully ready. Legals, usually when you call legals, they have different opinions, but if you ask them about cryptocurrency, it's absolutely, how to say, strange view on different angles, absolutely different. That's why what I expect before even putting regulations in for, it's the growth of infrastructure. Without growing of infrastructure for all products, usually we discuss, it will be quite difficult to discuss the, how to say, professional regulation in each area.
If I can just go back to the gaming point. The Minister raised a very good analogy with gaming in Gibraltar. And there are many similarities with the current environment. One of those is in relation to banking. When the gaming industry originally came to Gibraltar, there were difficulties in them getting banking arrangements. But because of the nature of the business that was brought to the jurisdiction and the work that the government did at the time, those gaming institutions were able to open bank accounts and therefore able to flourish. One of the problems we have in our industry is there is a lack of willingness by a lot of the banking community to actually provide the services. Some of that is because of fear of money laundering, fear of failure, fear of litigation. Other, it's fear of vested interests. They're going to be up against some of you. Their idea of a blockchain is owned by them and it's not called open, it's called a cartel. But by working with the banks, and in Gibraltar's case, with help of government and indeed the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, quick plug for the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, working to establish a mechanism by which the right ICOs can actually gain access to full banking facilities. That will probably be achieved in the same way as listing members act as the gateways to the stock exchange for those who wish to list. That they are the ones who do the vetting, the due diligence, the ensuring that they are dealing with the right people. That gives a reassurance to the bank that allows them to provide banking facilities. And again, that is similar to the approach that the government took and Gibraltar took in relation to the gaming industry. It's realistic and it's holistic. And it comes back to my point of self-regulation by the industry. And I don't just mean by the ICO players, I mean by their legal advisors, I mean by the accountancy firms, I mean by the banks and indeed by any stock exchange that provides platforms for them. Backed by sensible regulation that's thought out and is measured. And more than that, that the culture of the regulator is facilitative and not preventative. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, because of the lack of understanding, too many regulators are in the latter camp, which is why it's welcome that what's happening in Gibraltar in January has been done in conjunction with the industry, with the support of the industry, and to a certain extent at the initiative of the industry, and that I hope, again, will act as a role model for other regulators in other jurisdictions to follow, though possibly not the SEC. Thank you.
So we got about 3 minutes left. I got one more question. There's a movie came out maybe 2 months ago called Arrivals, and around the world there were 20 alien pods that landed in different countries around the world, and nobody had any idea what to do with them. And I think there's some analogies with blockchain technology, and no country knew what to do, and essentially they had to set up a command center with every country having a video sharing with some advisor sitting in front of that screen so they can connect to everybody around the world to discuss blockchain technology and communicate better. And as certain countries got scared of what other people were doing, depending on how they were relating to the aliens, the screen started going black. As countries themselves are in a certain way going black and canceling communication, or as you guys are developing the regulatory framework, how is it happening between you guys and the SEC and the Federal Reserve? Is there open lines of communication, or are you guys reading CoinDesk and trying to figure out what it means?
Well, yeah, well, obviously we're reading CoinDesk and hoping there'll be other more and more news sites around the world with not too much influence or self-interest, right? But there isn't real cooperation between politicians and authorities who regulate like SEC. We have to be honest. It doesn't work like that. We're meant to be the ones trying to write the laws, right? And then they're meant to be the ones sticking to the laws. So it doesn't quite work like that. But I'm glad. I think the message that everyone should take out from European Union's perspective is that at the moment, the regulators or the people who authorize the regulators are watching and not moving. And we're waiting for Eva's file and directive to come out sometime in January, hopefully. So I think it's a good opportunity to be in Europe. It's a good opportunity, and hopefully the banks will facilitate those transactions, and we don't get too close to IPOs, although there'll probably be a lot of IPOs coming out as well in this industry. But it does change things dramatically, because there's probably some kids that are geniuses, but they could never write a paper properly for an IPO, but they could write a white paper, which is simple, but they couldn't go through all the documentation. And this is the beauty of it. That's what they've allowed, is for people who could never raise money, and they're doing that now. And that window is still open. It's probably not going to last forever.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, I'm conscious of it, everybody will be around over the next 2 days. Take your time to network, meet with the regulators, talk about it, discuss your experiences. Please give a great round of applause for our panelists here. Thank you.